So we're going to talk now about the atonement. And to start this discussion, I actually want to look at the way that many Christians encounter the atonement most frequently, and that's in music. This is kind of a good rule of thumb if you want to know what Christians believe. It's good to look at what they sing. Music lyrics, as you probably know from all of the commercials that are just at the top of your head, sticks with us in ways that say, a really well thought out lecture that a professor has poured tears over just doesn't for some reason. But a jingle, right? A jingle. Well, these hymns aren't jingles, but I just want to show you how atonement or ideas about what Jesus' death does show up in some of the things that Christians sing and how they lead to different understandings of what the atonement does. So let's take a look at just a couple or a few. All right, think about, why did Jesus die? What did Jesus' death accomplish? Okay, that's what we're talking about when we talk about the atonement. All right, here's a famous hymn, Rock of Ages, Cleft for Me. I'm going to focus on just the first two stanzas. Rock of Ages, that's Jesus, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side which flowed be of sin the double cure, save from wrath and make me pure. So I want to note something here. This is making a claim about what the death of Jesus does. It saves from wrath, we'll have to think about whose wrath, and purifies the person. That's a statement about what Jesus' death does. Going on to the second stanza, but focusing on the last couple of lines. Not the labor of my hands can fulfill the law's demands. Could my zeal no respite know, could my tears forever flow, all for sin could not atone, thou must save, and thou alone. So, again, a focus on the death of Jesus is something that saves from sin and that is necessary, that the person, an individual, could not do, but Jesus must do. That's a way of thinking about the atonement. It saves people from wrath, it saves people from sin. There's a focus here on what it does for the individual. Let's look at another hymn. Sing my tongue the glorious battle. Hymns can have some pretty awesome names. All right. Sing my tongue the glorious battle, tell the triumph far and wide, tell aloud the wondrous story of the cross, the crucified. Tell how Christ, the world's Redeemer, vanquished death the day he died. Well, that's a little bit different, right? Sin is not here so much, but death is the real enemy, and Christ vanquishes death, and wrath doesn't show up. Going down to the fifth verse. Faithful cross, true sign of triumph, be for all the noblest tree. None in foliage, none in blossom, none in fruit your equal be. Symbol of the world's redemption, for your burden makes us free. And again, the idea here is that it's a salvation from death. Now, this is not incompatible with the last hymn, but there's certainly a different emphasis here. One more. Well, kind of one more. This is a modern hymn. It's called In Christ Alone. You could go on YouTube and find versions of it. And there's a little bit of a backstory here. The version that is on the left, the one with the wrath of God was satisfied, was the original version, the version that the authors and composer wrote. The version on the right is a version that appeared in a hymnal somewhere, and then the Presbyterian Church of the USA, which is on the more liberal side of the conservative liberal divide in theology in the United States, wanted to publish this new version. And they did what you should do, which is to go and ask for copyright permission. And the authors wouldn't give them the copyright permission because a line had been changed and they didn't like the line change. So I want to look at these two versions and again think about what's at stake in this one line change. All right. In Christ alone, who took on flesh, fullness of God and helpless babe. This gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save. Till on that cross, as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. As opposed to, till on that cross, as Jesus died, the love of God was satisfied. Now, that may seem like a really insignificant change. In fact, it's one word. But it was a big enough word that the authors weren't willing to say, yeah, go for it, publish it in your hymnal. And then when it came out that the Presbyterians had wanted this other version of the song, there was a big ballyhoo and people talking about whether the Presbyterians were ignoring the wrath of God and on and on and on. But again, we have here somewhat different versions of what the atonement does. Is it fulfilling the wrath of God? Is that what needs to be focused on? Or is it fulfilling the love of God? Is it something that God needs in order to turn back to people? Is it a sign of God's love? Those are different ways of looking at this. Now, some people would actually argue that those two are much more reconcilable, that the love of God and the wrath of God are actually pretty closely connected, but it's at least worth noting. So all of which is to say is that when Christians talk about the atonement, and particularly when they sing about the atonement, they can be, as we have talked about with so many things Christians talk about, talking about kind of different things, or at least having very different emphases. In the next section, we're going to look at some of the ways Christians have talked about the atonement, what are sometimes called models of the atonement or theories of the atonement, and make maybe a little bit more sense of some of the different emphases that we see in these songs.